Hello. All right. Continuing our, unfortunately, a bit of a slog through Patsy Rodenberg's The Need for Words, the Voice and the Text, second edition, which is all a part of my vocal studies, vocal video series on this channel, where I am trying to work on developing my vocal presentation, my voice, my trying to connect, trying to better present myself on camera, develop my instrument, my voice, to be able to better connect, to better talk to people out there. And so, in perhaps a misguided thing, I picked up this book, which is Patsy Rodenberg, very much a vocal coach extraordinaire. Has worked with like kind of top actors, worked for the Shakespearean Company, Royal Shakespeare Company, Guildhall, various things. So someone who does have a lot of knowledge. Unfortunately, I have been finding the first section of the first part of this book, which is the need for words, has been sort of her diatribe on why she thinks being a vocal coach is the most awesome thing, and what's wrong with society today. What's wrong? Because there's a lot wrong, and you very much get her grievances there. Some of which are well founded, and other ones you just sort of roll your eyes at, and parts of it are based on pop science, because that very much kind of justifies her point of view. I'm going to put this down. So hopefully, what I've seemed to have noticed is that the smaller section at the beginning of this book is the need for words, which seems to be her pontificating, her giving you the argument of why you should read this book, which is like, I bought the book. You could have a little introduction that did this. Indeed, the introduction has done a lot of this, and now this part of the first part of the book seems to be just a longer version of what was the introduction. So we're going to get through this chapter, and then hopefully the next chapter we're going to get on to the promised practical, concrete exercises and techniques for improving your voice. That is what I am hoping for. That is what I'm holding out. I'm holding out for. Now, the good thing is the very, very end of this chapter, after a lot of stuff, some of which is probably good points, but which I'm just is frustrating me. There is actually a section where I went, oh, this is Patsy Rodenberg, where she's actually on solid ground, where she's actually talking about something in her own field, which she's got something to say about. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But first, we need to get through this first part, which is Chapter 3, Cultural and Physical Barriers, which is cultural and physical barriers for people finding their voice, for people being, as she believes, very alienated from words, from kind of classical literature, from being able to communicate with each other. That there's a reason why, unlike back in the good old days, we were so good at communicating with each other with words. Now we're just terrible at it, and okay. We'll see how that goes, because all the literature back then was awesome, and it all sucks now. I don't know. Or you could argue that the sucky literature back then just all failed away, and now it's like it's all Shakespeare, whereas Shakespeare was just one voice amongst many, and people didn't actually realize how awesome he was back then, or how much he was going to live on. So, see, I will interject my little caveats throughout this thing, but basically I'm going to try and go through it, try and give it its fair hearing without, sometimes I just find myself lashing out at this stuff when it doesn't deserve it, and sometimes I find myself lashing out at stuff where I think that's probably the thing. So yes, barriers to having a voice, which are cultural, mental, physical, technical kind of jargon in various disciplines, and also kind of some of the same blocking mechanisms to words that are habits, to the speaking voice. And she kind of annoyingly throughout this says, oh, but I talk about this in much more depth and much more thought in the right to speak, which some ways I'm like, that annoys me that she keeps on referring to a lot, but I did it in this book, so I don't need to do it here. That somewhat annoys me, but on the other hand, it's like, well, then I'm not getting a further diatribe that's off topic. That's kept in another book. So I guess if you love this sort of stuff, you would go on to the right to speak. I probably will not. The right to speak. You can tell right there that we're going to get some opinions versus maybe some actual helpful stuff. All right. So here, these are the sections and my quick notes on them. The age of cacophony and image saturation, which is, yeah, the modern world with its media is a lot. So people are inhibited from speaking, though at the same time, everybody is speaking. That it's a very image-based society, she argues, and that takes the voice away from people and speaking, though, you know, people then learn to communicate in image in that also happens. But you know, it does kind of, people I think of sort of reviews or just sort of general posts where people just sort of communicate by posting pre-made images, which seems pretty lackluster and surface. So you know, there's some ways that I am also probably a crotchety old man who agrees with her, but it's like, I don't write it in a book and force other people to talk about it. Next section is embodiment, which is this word where, do I have a thing here? It's like, at the very end, what does she say? Words are not fully understood silently, but only when we fully embody them. And this seems to be the idea that as you voice and speak with power, language flows. You understand words and their weight improves. Which is this idea of the better you're able to speak words, the more you're going to understand them, you're going to integrate them, you're going to feel them in your body. It's very much kind of an instinctive physical thing versus just sort of a mental thing, and we'll go on to that later. Which, there's a part of me that's like, look, people have been reading silently to themselves now for hundreds and hundreds of years in a wide cultural thing, and that hasn't led to a sudden dullards. You know, she's very much describing what actors do, what performers do, and saying that this is the people who truly understand what's going on, which, you know, there's the cliche of dumb actors who are just speaking other people's words, which, you know, is a cliche, but it's not entirely wrong. It's like people, you know, just in love with the sound of their own voice, but not quite getting the things. That said, I think about some of the more successful things I've done about talking about literature on my channel. It has been when I've taken poems and I've decided, I'm going to analyze them. I'm going to do that. But at the same time, what I do is I memorize them. And I find as I memorize them, I keep on running over the words again and again. And that actually does unlock a lot more meaning in those words, having that focus. I mean, that's not something that's practical for like me integrating a novel, but it does work for a kind of a short poem, and it's quite powerful that way. And considering a poet as being so focused and every single word is very intricately linked, and it's a beautiful little puzzle box to be unlocked, it is actually a good way of doing it. But that's for poetry, but I don't know if that works for everything. And there's this whole thing of the intellectual anti-intellectualism or anti-intellectualism that seems to be coming out of Rodenberg here. I'm not quite sure. It may also just be a thing where we've swung too far this way. We need to swing back away from being all intellect to also being, let's feel these words, especially when it comes to something that is poetry, drama, novels, or something like that. So feeling these words does have, there's a validity to that, because it's an emotional response is what we're trying to get. This isn't a technical manual that we're just simply getting information from. She has a section on role models, which we don't have them. There's a thing on speaking public, how it's so rare for someone, how rare it is for someone to actually be actually a good communicator, that they, even the people who aren't actually that smart, or who not have that much of a message, can have a great success because they can speak. There's a power in hearing something directly in the flesh. That's something that human beings need. There is that kind of thing. If she says that to differentiate it from, she's very much talking from a theater person's perspective. But a lot of the great communicators of her age are people who are able to bridge that link through radio, through television, through the internet, through video platforms that way. And she seems to kind of downgrade that slightly, as it's not the physicalness of in the flesh, but that's kind of an older point of view. And the number of people who are going to know, I mean, the only way we know great stage actors now is because they also did a movie and they were able to kind of do both. But yeah, she's definitely got a lot of. She leans towards the theater in present. Now, I should actually go back and say that voice and language need daily use to get better, and those techniques include centering, improving posture, spine, and shoulders, standing with authority, eye contact, and presence, breath powering the voice, free and released voice, and muscular articulation, which I don't really know what are. Also, you also improve language skills by speaking great literature with passion. Physical commitment to language touches the intellect as well as the heart. Words are not fully understood silently, but only when we fully embody them. And it's like, yeah, that embody word, it's like, I guess it's literally you're bringing that word into your body and feeling it, and it's a physical thing that's going on, which, I mean, it's funny. Reading a work out loud definitely takes it out of you. You can definitely have a lot more. You can get through a lot more literature by reading it silently, just because it's not such a physical process. That said, there is rewards from physically reading literature. That's what I do on this channel, is daily read out stuff to work on to work that muscle, I guess. And I mean, that muscle has definitely gotten stronger as I've gone along in a daily thing. So that is a practical thing that I am actually doing. So yeah, then we did speaking public. There's the inability to listen. I mean, a lot of this does feels like a bit of kvetching of like, people don't listen these days, I tell you. There's ability to hear different points of view and to assess them. Kind of the idea of like not being able to take in other people's points of view. You just you reject them out of hand. You're in your own bubble of hearing your own views parroted back to you. Is that strictly a modern phenomenon, or it seems to me there's been plenty of people throughout history, the Protestants and the Catholics or other stuff, where there's just been those divides and people do not listen to each other, and great violence ensues as a result. There's tensions and physical habits as barriers, saying like, tension is the greatest barrier to connecting with our voice and words. Inside and outside attacks. So, there's the lack of confidence in words or in our abilities, which, comes from not being asked to do this daily. It maybe not being valued. It's being one of these things of people being great talkers is not seen as a good thing. I don't know how much I believe that. Just that lack of habit of speaking, habit of silence, which is odd way to think. I mean, I guess a lot of people, they are passive listeners. They're passively taking stuff in, but hasn't that always been the case? Like, the number of people who want to be the focus of attention doesn't seem to be a big thing. I look at the comments on a lot of just regular videos by like regular people's YouTube channels, and I would suspect that the majority of people who have a YouTube channel, have a YouTube account, don't have a channel, don't have multiple videos that they're publishing. They're very much there to listen. They want to listen. And is that a different thing than 100 years ago, where it was YouTube? Like, not everybody was an author 100 years ago. There's probably more people who are authors now. There's more people who want to be speakers, who want to be public now than there was before. I mean, she does talk about how there seems to have been this shift where people are more interested in public speaking now, but she so keeps on always kind of ragging on technology. But isn't that a result of people having easier access to be able to whether it's being a writer, whether it's being a speaker? Isn't that because of technology that you actually have a larger percentage of people? Still not a large people, because I think most people's inclination isn't to do this. So yeah. Physical barriers might manifest as tension and fidgeting when called upon to speak, a strained and constricted vocal capacity, a held or slumped posture that prevents sound from escaping, a breathing problem like locked or hesitant breath that comes in gasps and is never taken deeply enough. It sounds like stress. You're stressed because you're up in front of a bunch of people. This lack of practice, lack of confidence as a result, hesitation, clipped or unfinished sentences, choosing words lacking vitality and precision, laziness, carelessness, casual or offhand, all sorts of things like, oh, I'm going to act cool because I'm also, it's not, I think I was watching an older booktuber talking about how, some of these newbie channels, they're people who are trying to act casual, who kind of mutter stuff like that because they don't want to open up. They don't want to be seen trying, because to be seen trying is looked down upon, is embarrassing. I think deeply just embarrassing, and that kind of shuts people up. So as always, definitely things here. She looks at something like poetry, which I think she would see as a great opportunity for people to speak, whether they're reading other people's poetry or producing their own, but seeing it as something that's reserved for academics or specialized professionals, that it is something that's very alienated, I think, from the general public. I mean, I guess I would agree that at one point poetry seems to have been read more widely, and it's become more and more narrowed down as a thing, and it's being lost. Co-opted by advertising. I mean, in some ways, because she said poetry is often nothing more than words organized to have a high, sudden impact and to be made unforgettable, which, you can see why a lot of poets might have gone into advertising, because that is what they need in advertising, is short, sudden impact that's unforgettable, like a jingle or slogan. It's something that will grip into your brain and not be let out. Profanity, it can be powerful and shocking, but with profusion it begins to sound banal. Reveals an essential loss of coherence, more of a cry than something you're actually communicating with. You're actually articulating how you're feeling. You're just kind of going rah and saying a swear. Language of gestures. Not surprisingly, this is where people kind of mime how they're feeling or what they're talking about versus actually describing it. She does make the distinction. She's not talking about sign language there. That is an actual genuine kind of a language on its own and is very expressive and particular. So thumbs up for not just throwing that under the bus. There's a lot of these sections where I'm kind of like wondering why they're here, because it's supposed to be about barriers, but then we get into wit and wordplay and how that gets us to see the beauty of language in small passages, compressed, verging on something that's like kind of poetry, used as a tool to punch with, words against wrongs or others, just an example of someone, a wit speaking to power. Yeah, and we have examples of wit and wordplay in the modern world. Maybe she'd say there wasn't enough of it anymore. I'm not quite sure what she's getting at having it there. Then she irony and satire, which she has definitions of them and distinguishes between them and wit and wordplay. But why are we talking about irony and satire, barriers to a thing? There's the tyranny of the intellectual, danger of overthinking things, getting too far into our heads, being too nuanced and too many clarifications. The barrier of the intellect means that we would prefer to entrust our understanding of words to academics rather than to instinct. And I mean, I think this is getting down to the division of the theater department and the English department, where the theater department says, oh, we really know what Shakespeare is like, and the English department going, those dumb actors, they don't know what they're talking about. And, the answer is somewhere in between of, kind of living the language and performing it and making it work on the stage, versus someone who's like, oh, I don't watch stuff on the stage. I'm only paying attention to the language, the written words themselves. Once you break through the barrier of the intellect, you allow yourself to explore the evocative sensations of words. You discover the words move just as much as they mean, which I don't. This just seems like theater English department fight. There's I don't care. I don't care. What is it, yet again? What does this have to do with barriers? There's codes and code breaking. So codes for particular tasks or particular people. We have more activities. The more codes you have, the more activities in the mix with more people. Fine balance of getting code right, how you use it particularly. Unless we understand and practice shifting language codes, we will stay stuck in place and not get outside of our sphere. And I do think about this of, I think how I hear about it mostly is code shifting. Actually, not only in language, but in dress, in different communities, like you adopting something from a different community. If you're a white straight person who Canadian, and you start talking or adopting stuff from Black American or some other different culture, it's like, you can get a lot of trouble for stuff like that. There's a thing of understanding, but just equally kind of cherry picking is interesting. But I mean, it's something, especially he's talking it from an actor's point of view, where you need to shift, be able to talk different ways because you're an actor and you're depicting different people, different stratas of, because this could also be class as well as race as well as gender, all those different things, sexuality. There's all these different codes, which is a good thing to know in language. Yet again, this is like, is this a barrier, or is this just more a shade, another aspect of language that we're getting into? Then we get into the media and tabloid thinking, where Patsy goes into a rant about media and media think. Saying that media can be very superficial, skim across the surface, fill your head with irrelevant facts that will soon be out of date, turns you into someone who's just parroting certain lines, not thinking for yourself. It can be very circular. You just don't get anywhere in your conversation. I feel like it's sort of like this section. I feel like we're just kind of going back and forth. There's the thing of tabloid thinking is what she calls it. That's her coined phrase of tabloid thinking mocks other points of view and abhors dissent and, never gets anywhere. Okay. Some media sucks. And some of it, if you don't have media literacy, you're maybe not going to get out of that. And I mean, a part of it is we're just all in our own bubble and we're all in our own cultures. And sometimes it's very hard to jump to a new thing, So solar system, we are the only ones who exist, and our opinion is the only opinion. I think, therefore it is. I like it, therefore it must be right. Which you could say about Rodenberg's book as much as you can say about what she's talking about. Advertising must take a healthy share of the responsibility for the mistrust we have of language, which, I mean, there's advertising, there's been propaganda since time immemorial. There's always been, everyone's been always putting a spin on things, and advertising is the modern example of that. Yeah, I feel like these sections are just in this spiral of, we have problem with language. This is the problem. I have the solution to the problem. Why won't everyone just listen to me? I don't know if she's answered like whether we actually do have a problem, or for that matter, different ideas of the uses and evolution of language that I don't think Rudenberg shares. She seems to think if we could just peel away all this modern stuff and get back to the good old days, we would be awesome with language, and I don't know if I agree with that. I think there's something about language that is, its ambiguity and its difficulty is a part of the is a problem with language, but also a feature, a bug and a free feature with language. And if it was easy, then it wouldn't be as valued as I think as much as I value language. She has a thing on power talk, or don't talk back, which is very much about how in the good old days, there used to be more of a dialogue between leaders and the rabble, but now the leaders dominate. They pontificate. Don't talk back. She cites someone like Adolf Hitler's rise to power on the strength of words and verbal bullying. Somebody who was very good at speechifying, was very good at moving people, and was that a good thing? She would make the distinction between what she calls passion mongers in the next section, where you get people riled up and angry or something, but not a reasoned anger. She talks about great speakers like Martin Luther King, or I think Barack Obama she quite likes, where she says these are people who had things, who they offer the listener a choice. The true prophet is both an advocate and an innovator with words. We need them not because they arouse passion alone, but because they fire us with passionate thought, which is like, yes. And how you decide who is that and who isn't could be pretty subjective, and or hard to think down. She talks about sentimentality, meaningless emotion, a vial of artificial tears not backed up with real sympathy and compassion, often hiding kind of the ugly truth or violence. This comes in with fillers and cliches, non-vital words that convey nothing, or images or ideas that are dead, that don't evoke the world and don't actually awake the mind or heart. Some cliches start out as original ideas, but through overuse have become cliches. I don't know. This is this whole thing of I think that I feel like Rudenberg is at sea when she starts trying to make a distinction between making her own distinction between what makes a good speaker, and it's the truth. It's like, it's a big capital T truth, which I'm liable to distrust from her. Of someone like Barack Obama, some people will absolutely love, some people will absolutely detest. There's people in the middle who are kind of a little bit, he's a politician and he was trying to get certain things done. He came from a certain part of the political spectrum, wasn't as left as I would have liked him to be. But so just saying that like he's the greatest, it's like, well, I don't know. I think I can agree that he was a great speaker. He is a great speaker. Barack Obama is still alive. But when we get in, I don't know if I need a speech coach to tell me about who I should be admiring that way. I mean, I need to make my own, work out my own stuff of like, what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, what viewpoint. I'm probably going to be wrong a lot of the times, but I don't know if that's just not what I'm interested in. I think when it comes down to it, she goes through sexual politics, which a new anger entered women's voices once. New anger entered women's once placid voices, but also pride and individuality. So she gives feminist movement that, but she also feels that females are now taking on male vocal problems, becoming less listeners, like men are less listeners. There's very much kind of an either or of how she feels about stuff. Best exemplified by her then talking again about political correctness, where she, to be fair, she goes, the meaning of these words may not be so significant if we are, quote, normal, healthy, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, educated, employed, middle-class, heterosexual males. Those in power can always afford to use words casually and carelessly. Some might say recklessly, but those excluded from this privileged realm can rightly take a very different attitude. They can feel offended, which, I mean, it does have that, oh, I'm sorry you feel offended because of I used words that made you feel bad, which is like, fuck you assholes. But so she says all this, and then what does she do? Saying like, you might feel offended. And then what she does is she lists a whole bunch of super offensive words. And I'm saying like N-word, K-word, a bunch of really fucking offensive words, which seems to be her giving the middle finger to any reader who's reading this, who might feel like, if you're a black person, it's like, oh, thank you for you as a white person putting that word in your work. And obviously thinking political correctness is just something that was saying PC language was what PC language that was there to make us feel safer has put our views at risk. So who is the us in that, and who is the R in that sentence, and what does safer mean? I mean, I think there's a thing of just kind of a certain level of goddamn fucking respect, of saying like those are words that are meant to demean other people who are maybe not us, and that because they're not us, we don't give a fuck about, and which obviously Rudenberg in this section does not give a fuck about. And I really wish he would just get off this shit and get to the practical stuff. Now, after all that stuff, which I'm not gonna, it's like, Patsy, you got to stand on your soapbox and kind of sound off on this. I'm not going to remember any of it. Now, after all that, she actually has what I think of is like, oh, here is a useful section. Here's something that like you had something to say, and it was thoughtful, and it was germane to your book. And it's this RP or not RP. Now, this is the idea of received. It's called received pronunciation. Received pronunciation is, let me see if I can find it, is standard pronunciation of British English based on educated speech in southern England. And she talks about how the history of received pronunciation, because it's been something that's gone on for a while, that it's gotten taught by vocal coaches of how to speak, and it was often taught as the only proper way to speak, that you should feel ashamed speaking in public, you should feel ashamed if you used any other kind of speech in the way that you are sounding common or lower class or foreign, or not English, which is the best. It was taught very much as that kind of thing, and people really resented and hated this. And if you're someone who's Scottish or Welsh or one of the colonies, you were also made to feel like shit for not speaking this way, because this was the power, the voice of power speaking, and if you didn't submit yourself to this, you were shit. So that's the idea that being a vocal coach and helping people express themselves clearly and powerfully can be done wrong can erase or stigmatize people's history, culture, individuality. So this is something like she's actually taking on something that's like, wow, that is like a really important thing as your profession as a vocal coach. It's like, am I being a part of basically of oppression here? Am I silencing people by saying no? You can only talk that way. A barrier to speaking in public and speaking classic texts is a fear and resentment of received pronunciation. That's often used as that's how you should be doing Shakespeare, even though Shakespeare originally was performed with the performers' native accents at the time, with, and I think someone said, like, even like kind of standard English at the time would have been sounded much more like kind of Southern hillbilly talk, which is a thing. And just noting that received pronunciation isn't a fixed thing. Received pronunciation, like all accents, has been changing since the 1920s. Differs from the received pronunciation of the 50s, 1990s, or today. Viewpoint from teachers in the past was that received pronunciation was the educated way to speak, and that other accents were inferior. Received pronunciation is proper and the only way to speak. And I definitely thought about my father, who went to boarding schools, and his Scottish accent was beaten out of him, or, well, everything was beaten out of him in boarding schools, apparently. And he ended up with an English accent, even though he was a Glaswegian, but he was upper class Glaswegian. So if you're going to be upper class, you have to speak in a received RP English. Speech teachers seeking an idealistic ideal often fail to recognize the implications of cutting a voice off from its expressive roots. Do any of us have the right to oppress another human being's background, family, class, or culture? I think not, says Rudenberg. So she very much comes from that received pronunciation is a choice. To teach and learn it as a choice, as a tool useful for any speaker to have. Clarity being a chief benefit. It's placed apparently very far forward in the face. Vowel and consonant sounds are not lost. The consonants define the word, and vowels, the word, and vowels launch the sound into the world. And notes that some people find it very painful to be speaking in sort of the way of historical oppressors. And that she notes that like 90% of getting to receive pronunciation is just simply producing a clear, natural voice, useful for projection in a theater or in a speaking setting. So, not cutting off your all this sort of stuff. And then from there, it doesn't take much to get to receive pronunciation. But, I think there's something to be said for speaking clearly. Can be that's one of the reasons why people can resist polishing up their voice, because it sounds like you're putting on airs, you're putting on the cloak of oppressors, which is really interesting stuff, and I really wish we had more of that in this chapter. Overcoming the speech barrier. Barrier or words, part of the inbred traditions of a language and the deep-seated traditions of our culture. We simply have to learn how to overcome the speech barrier and to start to find a new voice. And once having found it, connect it with the word. Which I'm still working on. I make fun of a lot of what she's saying in here, but there's still, I wish she'd used more of her time explaining this concept, because I don't know if I've got it down yet. I guess just barriers to speech, and there's some of these barriers to speech I can see. Part of it is just not having had the training, and then connecting it with the word, which I guess I'll go with the whole idea of memorizing poems And that is a way to really sink down and really connect with what that poem is trying to say, and decoding it, and feeling it, and catching all the illusions, catching all the sounds. Like for a poet, it's like making the sounds of a poem are important. And I mean, that's important in a novel too. It's just less compressed of a way. So I mean, hopefully we're going to get more to the actual kind of technical stuff. We will find out in chapter 4, Finding a Voice, which starts off with releasing physical barriers. Until you release all constraints in your body and fully commit to the act of speaking, you cannot know or need a word. Embodiment is a full knowing and links the body, mind, heart, and spirit, which there's a part of me that goes, you want me to join some kind of fucking cult, Rudenberg? It sounds a little, you must do all this, or else you will not become a great speaker. You must release all constraints in your body and fully commit to the act of speaking. You cannot know or need a word. Cannot know or need a word. There's also hyperbole is definitely something that you find in the theater, and there's a part of me that thinks that there's that in there. The embodiment is full knowing and links the body, mind, heart, and spirit. Which, I mean, I guess it's like, this is the greatest thing that you can ever do. That's why I'm in this profession. So this is the only way that you can link the body, mind, heart, and spirit. It's like, oh, you are a theater kid, Patsy Rudenberg, and maybe I should just ease up on you and just like, okay, that's great. Let's get to the practical stuff. And who knows, maybe I will be transformed. Maybe my mind, body, spirit, heart, and all that will all be connected, and I'll just be a radiating being of greatness. Hopefully I'll just be a guy who can talk and communicate better on camera, which is what I'm looking for. All right. I will leave it there. This has been yet another long-ass talk. I am working on it. This is a part of this is I want to work on this stuff, and the best way for me to work on this stuff, ironically, the best way for me to work on this stuff is for me to speak it. So after shitting on Patsy Rudenberg for all this thing, yes, that is indeed how I process stuff. I have that resistance of, it's not the only way to process stuff, but it is my favorite way. So why am I giving her such a hard time? Probably because she's just not getting down to the brass tacks. I want a practical video. I don't want all this pontificating. I think I'm going to have to just wade through the pontificating, but really focus on, if there are practical things I know coming up in this chapter, I will just try and say, yep, okay, we had a little speech, but then, okay, here's the actual exercise. Let's focus on this. Let's try and make this a part of practice and see if it works. Because this is a lady who has a lot of experience and seems to have actually given professional speakers a lot of tools to work with, and that's what I want. I want tools to work with. I'm a working man. All right, I will leave it there. I've been Jay. More videos later.